Hey, everybody. I am Becky Drost. Thank you for tuning into the Guerrilla HR podcast. So, to kick off today, I want to talk about something that I have just recently learned about as far as kind of current things happening, and that is the concept of new collar jobs. I don't know if any of you had heard this term before. It's definitely new to me. I've definitely heard of blue collar and I've heard of white collar. Blue collar, traditionally thinking about those jobs that involve some kind of manual work, and it was blue collar because the outfits that would have been worn would have been something where dirt would be hidden. So, like a blue shirt versus white collar, where we think about some of those professional roles that would be in an office and they could wear a white collar shirt without it getting dirty. But now we have this idea of new collar workers. So, these are workers that are somewhere in the middle in the sense that these are people who are gaining skills and experience, but not necessarily degrees. So, think about some of the roles around tech. There might be certifications or trainings that are happening that are getting people prepared for those jobs, but they're not really fitting into what we traditionally had in this idea of blue collar, white collar. So I think it's really interesting that we've got this category. I think it's really a huge group of people, to be quite honest. But now we've got a name for it. So now we've got the new collar jobs where they pay well, and experience and the skills are more important than a degree. So I think that's kind of interesting. Today, we are actually going to talk to somebody who I think would really help us in some ways bridge that gap and thinking about where we have blue collar people that are elevating and getting some leadership skills and some leadership status. And that is Traci Austin. Traci is a certified HR professional. You know, I love my HR people. And she is the chief strategy consultant and owner of Elevated Talent Consulting. So welcome, Traci. Traci, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having me today.
So I'm excited because I know that you do a lot of work around leadership and about how to develop actual behavioral skills to become a great leader. And the other thing that I think is so awesome about what you're doing is that there is a group of people that I feel like really gets left behind when we think about the idea of leadership. And that is those people that are in those blue collar jobs who they want to grow, they want to develop, they want to do more. But I think there are organizations that kind of overlook those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely those. And sometimes I think we overlook ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's, well, I'm just a framer. Like, what am I going to do? And you see how I rolled my eyes when I said that? And
Yeah.
so much of this is if we believe something is true, it is. If we believe it's not true, it's not. And one of the keys to leadership that we've seen over and over and over again is so much of it is building the belief in the individual that they can truly do something that they don't believe they can at the time.
Yeah, I love that. Just as a motto, right? Like see in others what they can be, even if they don't yet see it themselves.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. It's like this seeing someone bigger than they see themselves. Same thing, different words, right?
Yes. Yes. Love that. So how do we do it? Like where do you even start?
The first place that we start is with self-awareness. And, there's so many conversations that we have. So I'll give you one. I was having a conversation with a leader the other day, and he was talking about what he was looking to do for his team. And he's like, when I'm talking to them, I just said, hey, I'm letting you go and do X, Y, and Z, and it's a great opportunity. And I said, I want you to pause for a second. He's like, well, why? And I said, will you hear me out and just listen to two different phrasings of this? He's like, yeah, absolutely. I said, so the first phrasing is, I'm going to let you take on this project. Mm-hmm. And the second phrasing is, I'm going to give you the opportunity to dig into a project that has XYZ outcomes to it. He's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Which one sells you and excites you and motivates you?
Right. He's like, I never realized I was saying that. I'm like, of course you didn't. Right. And so a key piece of leadership is that self-awareness. And then it's listening into how what we're saying actually lands.
Yeah, there's several things there. So let's talk about the how things land piece of it. I think that people make statements or they, just like the example you gave, and they really are not aware of that impact. And so what can people do through maybe some of those listening skills, but what else can they do to see, well, how did that land? Like, was that perceived in a way that's exciting and motivating versus like, good luck, I hope you don't fail?
Well, here's what's tricky. If I'm talking to, let's say, someone on my team and I say, "Hey, how did that land?" They're going to say fine. Right? And so this is what's so important about having our peers, giving ourselves permission and giving our peer teams permission to say, "Hey, I really want you to listen into how I'm communicating. And if something doesn't land right, more than likely I'm not realizing it. I love for that. I want to give you that opportunity to give me feedback, of course, outside of the situation and outside of the room, right? But that peer-to-peer is huge. And that's another reason why coaching is such an amazing opportunity, because it is that space where the commitment is for growth and we're willing to receive the feedback in those moments as well.
How do you get people to take ownership and to then be open to developing that sense of awareness? So I think to be able to say, I genuinely want your feedback and I want your honest feedback, of course, privately and in a safer space where I know that you're not coming at me. But how do you get people to be open to that and not just say like, well, it's a you problem, it's not me?
Yeah, I love that. Trust. I mean, trust is the biggest one, is that trust with one another, right? So, a lot of the work that we're doing is with teams, and sometimes they're executive teams, sometimes they're mid-level teams. And the way that we've been taught to communicate or just learned to communicate typically is about us and it's not about the team, right? It's the orientation of what is this in the best interest of? And when we're in the best interest of ourselves, we lose trust of others because we're out for that. So trust is that number one is, can I trust this individual to truly be out for what is in our best interest and what I share is not going to come back against me later.
I think that is so important. Just the piece that it's, well, both parts of that, but really that it's not going to come back to bite you. I've had people, certainly from the HR side of it. And I think sometimes on the negative things, or maybe not even negative, but just something that could have been better. And you have that conversation. And I've heard it from other people that would come in and say like, well, we don't trust HR and we don't want to talk to you about these things because what's happened in the past is they did then share that with somebody else or another manager, another leader, maybe even somebody else on the floor. And that comes back. And so people kind of go into some of these things thinking you're going to tell others about this. And then I'm going to be embarrassed about it. And again, you're never going to have that trust.
Correct.
So I think that can be really hard to overcome.
Right. And I think that there's a valid conversation here about what is HR's role. Because there are certain things that once in HR we hear something, we have an obligation to do something about it.
Sure.
And there is framing of conversations. I love the nudge theory. It's a book called The Nudge Theory, and it talks about framing and priming, right? But when we frame conversations, we can frame it so that one, we have the boundaries on what's there, but also we're setting folks up to, really be able to trust that because, and so often, and I found myself early in my career in, when I was in those HR roles of saying, yeah, there's 100% trust, then something would come out, whether it was sexual harassment or it was some sort of, theft or fraud or whatnot. Now I have to.
Yes.
And so, I have to go and essentially breach that confidentiality. And I just made a promise.
Right.
And that lost a ton of trust. Now, could I have set that conversation up to still get the same information, be able to do something about it and not lose the trust and the credibility that I had? Absolutely. And so for HR leaders listening in, I think that is such an important piece to really self-assess on and say, hey, how am I setting up these conversations? And am I setting them up in a way that is truly the and both for the individual and the organization and for me as a leader?
Yes. Now I'm having flashbacks to like some past discussions where I worked to really gain the trust of people like out of a manufacturing facility and the team, and they finally did. And so they came and they shared information that was not good information about somebody, and it led to a termination, and it came to an unemployment hearing. And I was like, I don't want to share these statements for an unemployment hearing. I was like, this is not the level at which I want to like break the confidence of this group of employees that finally were willing to come forward. And so like, I really struggle with that. And so, corporate leaders above me and legal and everybody saying, no, we have to pull this out now. And it it was so hard for me in that situation because I worked so hard to gain that trust. And it was like, this is, is this the point when it's okay to say, all right, we got to bring all this stuff out. I hate
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But yes, but it's there. It's there. And in that particular situation, I think it's back to your whole point of like, yes, I'm going to keep your confidence as much as I can. And there are situations where I can't do that anymore.
Right. Yeah. And it's like even in unemployment hearings, right? Like, it's like, okay, what's the max value of this $10,000? Is that worth it or not? Right. And that's where risk and reward really comes in. And some of those key conversations with our executive leaders. All right, this unemployment is going to cost us X if we lose it or win it or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
But what is the greater thing here? Are we actually going to end up losing more based on that? And those conversations for HR leaders, I know early in my career, I didn't have enough kind of overlook to know, hey, here's how I can actually have this conversation and present this to my senior leadership in a way that is really showing what's important to me and to our team and the cost benefit of it.
Right. Yeah. It's all the future impact and what does that look like and doing that analysis. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in that, what's happening right now, but you're exactly right. What is the greater impact down the road?
Right. And many times those decisions are outside of our hands, yet it is important that we know how to name them and make the specific requests.
Yes. Sorry, I did not mean to turn this episode into a Coach Becky call and make me feel better about my own past.
I did not either, and I hope that I didn't yet.
I know, but I'm feeling better, so thank you.
Amazing. And this is what we do, right? Like, what is coaching? What does it look like? Here we go.
Yeah. In action, here you have it.
Yes. And how are you feeling, Becky?
I'm feeling good about the situation now. I definitely learned from it. And I'm ready to move forward.
Part, right? Amazing.
So one of the things that I know you have done some good work around and some coaching around is the idea of people who bring complaints. And I'm going to let you say your phrasing because I think it's so fantastic. So I'm going to let you share it. But let's talk a little bit about that scenario where people are coming and they're just bringing issue after issue instead of trying to move things forward.
Yeah. So it's every complaint is just a poorly worded request.
Yes.
And, the complaint word is interesting because, I will get pushback from leaders saying, Traci, but we've been taught for 30 years that complaints are just opportunities. And I said, absolutely. But here's the deal. If I go out on the shop floor and I ask folks what their opportunities are, they're going to roll their eyes at me.
Mm-hmm. If I like take your corporate speak back to the other side of the wall.
Exactly. And get out of here. Right. But if I go out, I'm like, all right, what are your pain points or what are the complaints? Or, hey, I heard this, and this said, hey, you know what? We don't have guards on this. And hey, you know what? We don't have water anywhere near it. It takes us 10 minutes to go get it. And that's our entire break. Or we don't, whatever it is. Right.
Right.
Those are things that if we get really curious about, we can easily turn them into a request and understand what they're actually asking. And so often the complaint that is up front, like let's just a normal one, nobody wants to work anymore. I can't tell you how many times I hear that one. Nobody wants to work anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more. Well, we can't hire anyone. Okay, for what position? For what location? For what, for what shift? For, when we can get into it, it's not, we can't hire anyone. Like that's not true. Once we get into it and figure out what it is, now we have something specific, right? If I go to executive leadership and say, we can't hire anyone, sorry, like they're going to look at me and be like, bye-bye, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, if I go and
tired.
If I go in and say, hey, here's where we're struggling. It's on this shift. It's this position. Here's why. Here's the impact. And here's my request. My request is in order for us to be aligned with market, we need to raise this by $3 an hour. I also understand that we're looking at productivity and profitability within that. Therefore, if we can't raise it by $3 an hour, if we keep it the same, here's the bonus structure that I want to put in place that pays out monthly. And here's the impact that that's going to have on the team. on the leadership, on our customers, etc. So what we're doing is we're going through a problem-solving framework to come up with a request that will meet the and both needs of the different parties.
Yeah. And you said it politely with every complaint is a poorly worded request, but I love your words of stop bitching and start pitching.
I know, aren't those much more fun?
That is more fun. And we can say that here. It's okay. We're allowed to say those words here. So I love just that perspective of stop bitching and start pitching in the sense of, again, how do we move this forward? What is the solution? Of course, you have to identify what is the actual problem to be solved. And so that's where I think getting into that framework of what is that issue? Where are those pain points? I think that's so critical.
And culture, I'm going to define culture how we define it. Culture is the behaviors that we allow or do not allow in our organization. Do we allow bitching to run rampant?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do we want to? No. Okay. How do we curb that? Don't complain anymore? No.
Right.
Right. We're laughed off the shop floor and we're talked about consistently, which then, however, if we start doing this and modeling it over and over and over, what happens is it starts to catch on. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but when I'm around a bunch of folks that are making requests and that are problem solving versus consistently complaining, I'm in a much better mood. I'm much more likely to be productive, and I'm much more likely to move forward and get that thing done.
Yeah.
And so I actually have in my head, complaints is the same as avoidance.
Okay, so I'm thinking that through in the sense that complaints and avoidance. So the avoidance in the sense of it's not looking to provide a solution. It's not looking forward to actually resolve the issue. It's in the, I'm telling you this is here, but I'm not willing to do anything about it.
And I don't have anything better to talk about, so I'm just going to talk about the things that I feel like I'm not empowered to fix. And one of the beauties of turning complaints into requests is we're empowering our employees to actually fix some of those problems. Now, you have to follow through on it, and sometimes the requests aren't feasible, and sometimes it's like, okay, you've really nailed something amazing here, and it could be, how a line is set up. It could be very specifically of where we stock certain materials, right? Mm-hmm. Which has very minimal, dollar impact and impact to the flow. But if it, has a huge impact on the folks that are working there, it could be ergonomically, it could be they're not walking, 100 feet across every time. It's literally right next to them. Now, all of a sudden, you get a couple of those wins and they're like, oh, I can influence change here. Now we've just empowered them.
Yeah. I think in that situation too, sometimes where you have maybe so many suggestions, let's say now you've created that place where people are okay to bring some of those ideas forward. That's where I like offering, like just 3 or 4 solutions and saying, these are all of the things that have been brought to us as an idea. And you can knock out some of the ones that aren't feasible for whatever reason and let your employees know that. But then say, we have options A, B, or C. Which one do you think would work the best? What do you want to do? How do you think that that's going to work? What does success look like if we do that? Mm-hmm. And same thing, even if it's maybe not pie in the sky, all options available, it's at least taking that ownership to say, all right, I've made an option of what I think is the best here. And now I've got a little bit of buy-in into it. So I'll be committed to making this work.
Right. And the other thing that happens through this process is we're teaching our team critical thinking skills. It's like in the coaching that I do, one of the biggest things that comes forward is a challenge around critical thinking. Mm-hmm. Teams not having the level of critical thinking that the leader needs them to have. And so my question is always, well, tell me how problems are solved. Do they bring you a problem and you solve it? Are you asking questions so they're learning your thought process? Or, or here, have we allowed our teams to actually make decisions to the highest level possible at the level that they're at? So that starts to shift it to say, hey, you can absolutely make this decision up to X dollar amount within this framework, but here are the unintended consequences I want you to think about. What's the flow down the line? What's the flow here? What does that look like here? So that we're learning very specifically what the impacts are and who are the other players that we need to take into account, because there's going to be a multiple competing priority that will have an impact
Of
on us.
course. Yeah. 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 I think that piece of it, the awareness and the problem solving and the working together across teams is so important because as a leader, particularly, even if you're not yet fully that people manager, maybe you don't quite have the people, but certainly once you do, your organization wants you to get things done through your teams. And if you're
Yes.
not allowing them to do some critical thinking and to have input into decision making, then you're stopping that, and it's you can't get it all done. That's why you have that team there. And so it really is important to use them and get work done successfully through your groups of people.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So how does somebody start with this? So if you are in an organization, like I guess I'm looking for kind of a methodology here. You've got some folks, you maybe see some good technical skills, you see some potential with some skills towards leadership, but maybe they don't have that awareness piece. They don't know how to get work done through other people. Where do you start and how do you approach them to say, I think that you can do more from a leadership standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have a program called our Mentor Program, and this program teaches some leadership skills for those individuals. And then what we do with that is we have them be a buddy for a new hire for the first 90 days. And so those new hire buddy programs is a great way to do that, where they don't necessarily have authority, yet they have influence, and we can start to kind of build in those best friends at work in a way that it's not a supervisor, but it also allows that buddy to start to learn some of those skills and grow within their role. So that's one of the key ways that we do it. So, the beautiful thing about training is it's one thing to know how to do something yourself. It's another to train another person on it. And so training is one of the beautiful ways to help individuals start to understand what leadership actually looks like.
Yeah, and I love the example that you just gave with the mentoring. I think that there's so much value for the new hire and that mentor for sure. I love that idea.
Yeah, so that's one, and then different project teams is another one. Yes, you've got your main job, but typically there's different project teams that are happening. If you have somebody you're not sure yet, let's put them on a project team and see how they do in that role. That's a little bit different with people that aren't in their day-to-day team.
Yeah, I love that because I think of that as like the low bar but high ceiling. Like, they're going to be supported by a team, so it's not all on their shoulders, but it also gives them an opportunity that they could perform exceptionally.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love that. Okay, so I have one last question to wrap things up, and that is, let's say that you have an individual who is working and they want some of those leadership opportunities. They are seeking that out and they're kind of thinking future forward. What do my next steps look like? What is something that individual can do in the next 24 hours to help kick them off on their journey to leadership?
Yeah, I would, in the next 24 hours, I would go have them talk to their teammates and say, hey, what are the things that you see in me that I do incredibly well? And then follow that up with saying, what would you like me to do that I'm not currently doing?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great advice. So there you have it. Well, thank you, Traci, so much for coming and chatting with me about leadership and getting people some development. Lots of good ideas here, and also some good warm love that I needed too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today, Becky.
Thank you. All right. So Traci gave us some really great tips of things that people can do when they are looking to offer some development opportunity to others, as well as for those actions that an individual can take to start advancing themselves. All right. So we are at the end. So, of course, we have, oh my God, Becky, look at that comment. So, when we opened our show today, we talked about this new group of new collar versus blue collar and white collar jobs. And when I was online looking on social media, which, of course, is where I get all this great information, there was somebody who was sharing information from an article about, jobs that pay over $100,000 that don't need degrees. And they really fit into this category of new collar jobs. And it was so funny because of all these different jobs listed, somebody wrote in the comments and they said, those aren't blue collar, those are seated dweller jobs. And I thought the description of those roles as being seated dweller jobs was pretty funny. So that one kind of made me laugh. Now, keep in mind when we are talking about things like over $100,000 and blue collar and white collar and new collar, those are not the Fair Labor Standards Act definition. So we do have some compliance issues when we think about pay and how people are paid. But again, blue collar, white collar, new collar, room for everybody out there and room for everybody to make a living wage in those roles. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you again soon.
That's it for this episode of the Guerrilla HR podcast. We hope you found some unconventional wisdom and actionable advice to help you in your own HR journey. Remember, we're all working together to build better workplaces. Want to join in the conversation? Send us your questions, stories, and maybe even your own guerrilla tactics to podcast@guerrilla-hr.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your network. Until next time,